Okay. Hello and welcome to our summer orientation series for families, which will include sessions each Wednesday at noon throughout the summer, with recordings posted to our webpage for your convenience. Our summer series touches on a wide variety of topics, all of which we hope will help you help your students thrive through their transition to Dickinson and throughout their experience. The Q&A option is available for this webinar, so please do not hesitate to ask any questions. We'll save time at the end of the presentation to make sure all those questions are answered. So just to introduce myself, my name is Sophie Bisba. I'm the Assistant Director for Campus Activities. I oversee all clubs and organizations and fraternity and sorority life on campus. And today we have with us Access and Disability Services. We have Joyce, the Associate Director for ADS and SOAR, and we have Marni Jones, the Dean and Executive Director of ADS and SOAR.
Hi, everyone. Good to see you. We may have additional folks joining us along the way. And as Sophie mentioned, we'll have some time for some Q&A at the end. So those folks that have specific questions um, can um, can make sure that we'll make sure they have the opportunity to do that. Um, but I'm just going to start our presentation here.
And I will just point out, if you're not muted, it will be helpful for you to mute your microphone so that everyone doesn't hear. I had some technical difficulties this morning, so I'm actually joining you on my phone, so hopefully that'll keep on working. But if anyone has any trouble hearing us or accessing the audio, please be sure to let us know. So we're going to start by just giving you a overview of what you can expect in our session. John, we'll start with that.
Yeah, so we'll just introduce ourselves and our roles, as well as the other colleagues in our office who aren't with us today, but are part of the Access and Disability Services team. We'll dispel some common myths about disabilities and disabilities at Dickinson and accommodations at Dickinson. We'll give some data on the Dickinsonians with disabilities who receive accommodations. We'll go over what the accommodations process is in general terms. And then, like we said, if there are specific questions, we can address those. And we'll have some time for those questions at the end. We'll give you our contact information as well. It's easily findable on the website. That way you can follow up with us at any point with any questions you might have. So Sophie already introduced us. My name is Joyce. I'm the Associate Director of our dual offices, Access and Disability Services, ADS, and SOAR, Strategies, Organization, and Achievement Resources. I'll let Marni introduce herself, but we have several other members of our team. Tracy Corliss, who is our proctoring manager. Erica Salter manages all of our assistive technology-based accommodations. Amy Comfer is our administrative person in the office who manages communications and is in our front desk person, so to speak. And Jen Clark, who does a lot of work with faculty and universal design, but also is the ADA coordinator for campus. Marni?
Yeah, I'm Marni Jones. I oversee, we make folks aware that we do have these two offices that operate in the same location, but they're not synonymous. ADS is Access and Disability Services, so you'll see us use that acronym, and a little bit later on we'll talk a little bit about SOAR. I also want to just make you aware that when you send an email to access@dickinson.edu, that email might be responded to by John or Amy, but we also make sure that if either one of them is out of the office, there's always someone monitoring that email. So when you reach out to us, even though you may know our names, reaching out by sending an email to access@dickinson.edu is going to make sure that you are connected with the person who can answer your question or help you with whatever your needs may be. So we do find that there are often a lot of myths associated with disclosing a disability. And so what we're going to do is sort of point out those myths and then counter them with the reality. So the first myth is that disclosing a disability, I'm sorry, the first myth is it would really be ideal for me to wait and see how things go before I disclose my disability to ADS. What do you think about that, John?
Generally, not the best idea for a few reasons. One is we have some data, historical data that shows, as you can see here, that those students that utilized academic accommodations get about a half, see about a half a point increase in their GPA compared to those students who did not use their accommodations but may have been eligible for them, which makes sense given that the accommodations that students may receive academically are meant to address the barriers that those students might experience in the classroom, right? The way that our accommodations are set up is a little bit different than in the K-12 world in which I used to work, and I was familiar with before I started working in higher ed, in that students can decide which accommodations they might need in a particular class and which ones to use. And so generally when I meet with students, I let them know that it's a good idea to disclose to the office and go through the process of requesting accommodations because that doesn't require that they necessarily use them, but those accommodations are then available to them if they would like to use them. It's a lot more difficult when a student is in November and things are really busy and piling up to go through that process at that point. And so earlier is generally better for a variety of reasons. Another myth that sometimes we encounter is that students are concerned about having control over who knows about a diagnosis or who knows about their eligibility for accommodations. Marni?
Yeah, so we have a system that's called the access plan. And what that means is a student logs into their access plan and the student makes the decision as to which professors they'd like to notify about their eligibility for accommodations. So ADS does not send out a communication with that information. And students, as you can see on this slide, the specific accommodation will be noted, and then where it says select option, the student can click will use, will not use, or unsure of need. And that way they can indicate what they think is going to be the necessity or lack thereof of their accommodation, and then they disclose that to faculty members, to their professors. So it is the student who has complete control over who would know about their eligibility for accommodations. Nowhere in our process is a student required or expected to share a diagnosis with their faculty member. It doesn't mean that they can't, but the faculty member will only be made aware of what is the accommodation for which they're eligible, not the reason for that accommodation. The next myth that we've encountered is students feeling a sense of concern that their eligibility for accommodations will appear on their transcript or on their academic record. What do you think about that, John?
Yeah, it doesn't appear anywhere. There's no there's a record of it within our office if students end up going to, say, grad school and they require a record that of the accommodations they received at Dickinson. That's something we can provide to them. But there's no indication on their diploma, on their transcript, on anything like that that they received accommodations or what they would be. And just as Marni said, that that's information that is at the very beginning of the process. It's only known by the student and by our office. And then at the point at which they decide which accommodations they'd like to use in their individual classes, that information about their eligibility would then necessarily be made known to those professors, right? But that would be it. It doesn't really go beyond that at any point. Some students, though, are still concerned that their professors might think less of them if they know they're eligible for accommodations, or might kind of alter their expectations for them in their classes. Marnie's been at Dickinson quite a bit longer than I have, so she can probably better speak to the reality of that.
Yeah, so I've been at Dickinson for 15 years, and I can attest that I work very closely with faculty who are whose perceptions of students who request accommodations is that these are students who are resource savvy, who are taking the initiative to convey important information. They have across the board a great deal of respect for students with disabilities, because many of these professors either are the parents of children with disabilities, family members, maybe they themselves have disabilities. So what the data has shown when we run surveys and when we do conversations, when we engage in conversations with faculty, is that we're finding that faculty have a high level of respect for students who request accommodations, and particularly the earlier that they request them, so that students are lining up what is needed to level the playing field for them, as opposed to waiting until they see how things go on a first test and then regret that things may not have gone as hoped. And I'm talking in this case specifically about students with academic accommodations, but generally professors who are made aware that students have accommodations are very comfortable facilitating accommodations for them and working with those students to level the playing field. So another myth that we encountered with students is telling us that they thought it was just going to be a hassle, that their professors would be burdened, or that it would be too challenging for them to set up their accommodations. What would you have to say about that, John?
Yeah, like I mentioned, the one of the big differences between accommodations at the college level versus K-12 is that in the K-12 environment, it's most likely that accommodations are set up for students, right? If a student has an IEP or a 504 plan, that's something that they might participate in that conversation, but generally the school and the student's family are making those arrangements, and then whatever it is as far as accommodations go is implemented in the classroom for the student. Here, and at the college level more generally, students are the ones who are responsible for taking the steps to set up their accommodation. So it's true that students may have to take steps that they're not accustomed to taking in high school, but I definitely wouldn't characterize it as a hassle. Marnie referenced earlier what is called our access plan, which is the platform on the gateway, on the Dickinson gateway, that students and professors use to communicate about accommodations. Um, and so what you see here is a little digital card, the way that it would appear on a student's access plan. And they'll have a list of their accommodations. And like we showed you in an earlier slide, for each accommodation, they can select an option, whether they will use it or will not use it, or just they're not sure about whether they'd like to use it in that class. And then they click a button that would send that information to their professor. Their professor receives that, and then they'll arrange a meeting through this platform um, once they're here on campus to meet with their professors to talk about their accommodations, really to make sure that they're on the same page as far as what is relevant in the class, what needs to be used in the class, and what that usage is going to look like. For example, if they have extra time on a test, um, does the student prefer to take the test with the professor? Do they prefer to take it with us in the proctoring center? Are there any time limitations on the part of the student or the professor that they have conflicts with another class, and so they maybe can't use extra time before class or can't use extra time after class? And they'll kind of make those arrangements together. So what we do as part of our process, and we'll talk about this in a bit, is we will train incoming students, typically the week leading into orientation, on how to utilize the access plan. We also invite incoming students just to stop by our office at any point in the first couple of weeks if they need a refresher on how to use it or they can't find where to go. So we want to make sure that they have all the tools they require in order to set up their accommodations. And then it's the same process for future semesters. Um, so they'll get accustomed to doing this at the beginning of their time at Dickinson, and then have those tools to be able to utilize for future semesters. Okay. Um, Similarly, students might be worried about arranging for extended time on exams. We highlight this because it is our most, I would say, our most common accommodation. Um, and so students might be worried about how to arrange for that or that it's going to be burdensome. Marni?
Yeah, and so very similarly, the way to arrange for extended time on exams, as John will click on the pulling up the visual for it, you'll see that in the access plan card, is it not popping up, John? There we go. So it indicates that for test taking setup, and then there's one more slide that if you click on that, or one more visual, you can see that the student can indicate this is a quiz or a test. They can have, it's automatically defaults to the amount of time for the class. So it's quite easy for a student to just check that box that says apply extended time, indicate the date and the time that the test is slated to start. And then this all happens very behind the scenes where the student has made the request. The professor, after consulting in conversation with the student, can determine if the student would prefer to take the test in the classroom or go to our proctoring center where there's a test distraction reduced environment and take the test in the proctoring center. And if that occurs, then we arrange to have the professor provide us with information such as how they can be contacted during the test if the student has any questions, what kinds of instructions they would give, what materials they need to be allowed to bring. So the student can take the test in the proctoring center, but still be able to ask questions of their professor if they have any during the test. And we actually have a slide showing you what the proctoring center looks like. After we show you the building that we're located in. So yeah, we are located in Old West, lower level. As you can see, the acronym is called the OWL. And so John's that little arrow there with his cursor can maybe just show you that behind where those steps are is where the Old West lower level wing is. Yep, right down there.
This gives a little bit of a visual of the proctoring center. That, you know, one picture can't kind of capture the whole space, but it gives you a sense that within the proctoring center, there are a number of individual desks. Some have computers, some do not. So some are ready for those students that have test taking needs that would require a computer based on the class that they're in, and others would just be the table service and we would have the paper copy of the test for them. But we have room dividers in there. We have noise canceling headphones, earplugs, a variety of, you know, we have all the kind of like supplies that students would need. So when I talk to students about setting up their exams, I let them know that yes, they need to make their arrangements with their professor and they need to determine a plan. And if that plan is that they're going to take a test 6 weeks from then in the proctoring center, once they and their professor confirm that on the Access Plan platform, the student's next step is to show up for the exam. They'll typically get a reminder 2 days before letting them know, hey, you have an exam scheduled with us at this day and this time. But we will have done the work as far as getting the exam from the professor, as Marni said, getting any special instructions, making sure that we have a calculator for them if they need that, we have pencils in there, etc. So I find that a lot of students, there are some students that use the proctoring center depending on the test or the subject, and others just prefer to use it all the time because it gives them some degree of consistency from class to class about what their test taking environment is going to be like. Do you want to talk a little about the lounge area?
Sure. So, you know, when you walk into our hallway, the entire hall is a space that is used by our offices. And what you can see here is that on the wall, there are displays of famous people with disabilities, as well as a number of posters. You can only sort of see one little one in the middle, so it's a little hard to see on this slide, but of posters of students who have chosen to make their own poster sharing maybe information about their disability, but also what makes them exceptional. We also have resources in the hallway, such as you can see the ADHD guidance bulletin board there that has a lot of handouts that students can pick up. But we also have a wealth of additional resources that are associated with our affiliate office, SOAR, which stands for Strategies, Organization, and Achievement Resources. And I think the next slide will show a little bit more about that.
Yeah, this shows on the right-hand side, you can see just a screenshot of a section of the SOAR website highlighting some of the different areas in which we provide support to students. Typically through SOAR, and we'll work with any student, whether they have disclosed a disability to ADS or not, because the offices are separate, right? We'll do one-on-one time management sessions. We occasionally do webinars and workshops. We have a lot of online resources. And then we have handouts and a resource gallery out in the hallway that Marni mentioned. So usually at the beginning of the academic year, that's a pretty busy area just because there are a lot of returning students who know that that exists. So they come in to grab calendars or to grab handouts that cover a variety of topics, everything from how to prepare to meet with your professor, to how to take notes on what it is that you're reading, to memory strategies, to tips on stopping procrastinating, note-taking strategies. There's a whole variety of things there. But yeah, we also, like we mentioned, we meet one-on-one with students. For incoming students, that's often on some of the things that will become a normal part of their academic life, but maybe haven't been yet, like understanding how to make sense of their syllabi, understanding how to structure their week and their months, given that all of their assignments are going to be given to them in their syllabi on day one. And now they've got to figure out how to budget their time to make sure they stay on top of things rather than being assigned things daily or on a weekly basis, which would have been more typical at the high school level.
So we like to make students aware. We like to make students and parents aware of just how many students we're talking about in terms of working with our office. And so knowing that students often feel comfortable knowing that they're in good company with a number of students who are also working with ADS. So the first slide that we have will show you a breakdown of the major categories of diagnoses. So at a glance, you can get a sense of how many students are currently working with ADS. This is not necessarily representative of the number of students who have this diagnosis, but merely the number of students who are receiving accommodations through ADS on the basis of this diagnosis.
Yeah, and these are students who have that diagnosis, not unique students. So we aren't serving whatever the total would be there of like 700 students. The students can be represented in more than one category, except for that first line that you see there of those who only have a diagnosis of ADHD and no additional diagnosis that they've disclosed to us. These are the types of accommodations that have been granted as of this past semester. Again, these are the number of accommodations, not the number of students. So there are 385 students who were granted academic accommodations. Of the 55 students who were granted dietary accommodations, some of those also received academic. So again, this doesn't represent the total number of students who've been granted accommodations, but gives you a sense of that most of the students that we work with are receiving academic accommodations, but we also support housing and dietary accommodations as well.
And this last slide about our statistics is to let you know that each year at commencement, we we take a look at the number of students who are in the graduating class who received accommodations through ADS. And as you can see, we're looking at more than a quarter of the class receiving accommodations through ADS, and also a quarter of the class who received Latin honors, for example, cum laude, summa cum laude, magna cum laude. Those are all students who also received accommodations. 28% of the students who received departmental honors were students who received accommodations through ADS, and 22% of prize winners. So we're expecting great things from the students who work with us.
Sorry, I had to unmute. Okay, so we'll head over to the ADS website. I'm going to stop sharing for a moment just so I can switch over to my browser window, just to show you where a couple of things are. Our website has a lot of information, so we want to make sure that we just kind of introduce you to it. This would be your first destination if you're looking for information about accommodations at Dickinson. So this is just dickinson.edu/ADS or /access. This is our homepage. So you see we have a menu here on the left-hand side. If you scroll down, we have each of these is its own section of our website. First, just about the accommodations process in general, but then we have different pages for the different categories of accommodations where we support students' academic, housing, dietary, etc. We have then some information that is less relevant to you all, but maybe more relevant for faculty. And then we also have some student guidance information. We have information about SOAR, other resources on campus, etc. So we really encourage you to explore the website, see what kinds of answers you can find there to the questions that you might have. Again, if you click on these different sections, or sorry, if you go, what I wanted to do, whoops, if I can navigate back, there we go, is right here, looking to request an accommodation. So this gives an overview of what the steps are for students in requesting accommodations, as far as disclosing to the office, providing documentation, so that we can determine eligibility as well. And
yeah, and John, if you would be, yeah. Can I trouble you to go back to that real quick?
Yeah.
So parents, if you have want to look for a page that's specific to you, if John goes back to the home page,
yes.
The Access and Disability Services overview, at the very bottom right corner, there is a little circle that says Parent and Guardian Resources. So if you click on that page, you'll see that what we have there are just some information about what to expect. There's a page that's called High School versus College that might help elaborate a little bit more about the distinctive differences between the way students are accommodated in high school versus college. And then just some tips for you as parents and guardians. So we are happy now. I put a note in the chat that you're welcome to put questions in the chat, but you're also welcome to, I believe that, is it possible for people to just unmute and go ahead and ask the question? Okay. And remember, all questions are good questions.
I think there might be an audio issue, at least there is on my end. Make out the question.
How about now? Is that better?
There we go. Perfect. Yes. Thank you.
Sorry. So was what I said before it wasn't understandable? Okay, let me try again. What role does if the accommodation is related to a medical condition, a diagnosis, an autoimmune disorder, what role does the wellness center on Dickinson's campus play when it comes to I don't know if your child has a student has a flare up and it needs to be seen by the wellness center.
Do you want me to take that? So there's kind of two parts to that question that we can address. And the first is that we do have a specific accommodation for students who may have a severe and chronic medical condition that is going to impact periodically impact their functioning, whether it's their capacity to attend class or their capacity to do work. And so for those students, I work closely with both the student and the faculty member on creating what's called a flex plan, which is basically a plan that relates to potential reasonable flexibility regarding attendance or course participation. And so what would happen in those instances is, rather than getting the Wellness Center involved in terms of communication to faculty, the faculty member and the student actually work out a plan of action at the beginning of the semester that says what is going to happen if there's a flare-up. And then there's a rather comprehensive, and if you email us, we can send you the online form that you can see what a flex plan looks like. But it's a comprehensive strategy for what if this happens and the student misses class? What if this happens on the day of a test? What if this happens when a student has something due? And so we do have a specific strategy in place for students who are going to have flare-ups. The reason that the Wellness Center might not be involved is that we don't want students feeling like when they're unwell, they need to go to the Wellness Center to document the fact that they're unwell if this is something that is severe and chronic and already documented. So the best circumstance for the student would be to rest up and get well, right, rather than to go in to need to get, if they're going to the Wellness Center to get verification. If, on the other hand, they would be going to the Wellness Center for treatment, then that is something that they would probably want to establish a relationship with the Wellness Center early on to determine when are those instances when it might make sense during a flare-up to go to the Wellness Center, and when might it make more sense to stay home and rest and recover. Does that help to answer your question?
Thank you very much. That's really helpful. Thank you.
Absolutely.
I will also
Sure.
add that next Wednesday's session is with the Wellness Center. So that would be a beneficial one for you to visit as well, so you can hear their side of things as well.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, other questions?
Well, please know that this is, of course, not your last opportunity to ask questions. We will quite often have a phone conversation with a parent, and right after the phone conversation, the parent might say, "Oh, I forgot to ask this," and then send a follow-up question. So we're open all summer long. We are happy to answer any questions. We have an intimate understanding of the challenges of being a parent who has been responsible all along with helping to facilitate accommodations for your students, and now having to see the ball be in their court to figure this all out. So we are more than happy to, unlike some offices that may be a little bit more, you need to just let your student figure it out on their own. We are very much in the mode of understanding the need for transitioning and for assisting you with assisting them with their transition to college. So please don't hesitate to reach out. What we particularly enjoy is when parents and students might connect together. So maybe you'll make a phone call together, or maybe you'll send an email. As John put in the chat, our email address is access@dickinson.edu. And again, our website is www.dickinson.edu/ADS.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Take care.
Thank you.
You got that?
You're welcome. Have a great day.